Let us discuss standard 530 audit sampling. Before moving into the standard aspects, we will have a basic idea of what is a sampling. For an example, if you take a piece of cake, you will arrive at the features of the cake, how the taste of the cake. You need not eat the entire cake to form an opinion about how the cake is made. Similarly, the concept of sampling. If you take a piece of information which will represent the entire population, that is the base of sampling. Let us move into the scope of SA 530. It deals with how the auditors use the technique of statistical and non-statistical sampling when designing and selecting the audit samples for the purposes of performing test of details and test of control and evaluating the result from sampling. Objective of this standard. The object of this standard is to establish a procedure for the auditor when using the audit sample to provide a reasonable basis for the auditor to draw a conclusion about the population. To select a piece of information and draw a conclusion, that is the fundamental of the sampling technique. Let us move into the definition part. What is an audit sampling? The application of audit procedure to less than 100% of the populations such that all sampling unit have a probability, a chance of selection in order to draw a conclusion on the entire population. Take a piece of information and draw a conclusion for entire population, that is the base of sampling. What do you mean by a population? The set of data from which a sample is selected and about which auditor wishes to draw a conclusion. What is the sampling risk? Very important question. The risk that auditors' conclusions based on a sample may differ from the conclusions if the entire populations were subjected to the same audit procedure. Sampling risk can lead to two types of erroneous conclusions. In case of test of controls, that the controls are more effective than actually they are, or in case of test of details, that the material misstatement does not exist when in fact it really exists. The auditor is primarily concerned with this type of erroneous conclusions because it affects audit effectiveness and is more likely to lead to an inappropriate audit opinion. And case number 2, in case of test of controls, that the controls are less effective than they are, or in case of test of details, that a material misstatement exists, in fact it does not really exist. This type of audit conclusions affect audit efficiency, as it would usually lead to the additional works to establish that internal conclusions were incorrect. Let us move into the definition again. What is non-sampling risk? It is defined in a negative way. Auditor reaches an erroneous conclusion for any reasons not related to the sampling risk other than the sampling risk. Whatever the erroneous conclusions auditors held responsible, that kind of risk is called non-sampling risk. What is anomaly? A misstatement or deviations that is demonstrably not representative of misstatement or deviations in the population, a hidden kind of bug, that is called anomaly. What is the sampling unit? The individual items constituting the population is called sampling unit. What is a statistical sampling? For meeting the criteria of statistical sampling, it should meet two criteria, two conditions: random selection of samples items and the use of probability theory, that is the statistical based theory, to evaluate sample results, including measurement of sampling risk. And a non-statistical sampling is defined in a negative way, which does not satisfy the above two criteria, is called the non-statistical sampling. A sampling approach does not have characteristics as mentioned in condition 1 and 2 above is called non-statistical sampling. What is a stratification? The process of dividing the populations into the subpopulations, each of which is a group of sampling unit which have similar characteristics. It's a subunit of the main population. What is the tolerable misstatement? Is important area. A monetary amount, the amount set in monetary terms by the auditor in respect of which the auditor seeks to obtain an appropriate level of assurance that monetary amount set by the auditor is not exceed by the actual misstatement in the population. And what is the tolerable rate of deviation? A rate of deviations from the prescribed internal control procedure set by the auditor in respect of which auditor seeks to obtain an appropriate level of assurance that the rate of deviation set by the auditor is not exceeded the actual rate of deviation in the population. Sampling design, size and selection of item for testing. Auditor shall determine a sample size sufficient to reduce sampling risk to acceptably low level. The auditor shall select items for the sample in such a way that each sampling unit in a population has a chance of selection. That is the thumb rule of sampling, whether it is statistical or it is a non-statistical sampling. Performing the audit procedure. Auditor shall design and perform audit procedure which is appropriate to the purpose on each items selected. If the auditor is unable to apply the designed audit procedure or the suitable alternative audit procedure to the selected items, then it shall be treated as there is a deviation or there is a material misstatement, as the case may be, if it is related with test of control or it related with test of details. Nature and cause of deviations and misstatement. Auditor shall investigate the nature and cause of any deviations or misstatement identified and evaluate their possible effects on financial statement. In the extremely rare circumstances when the auditor considered a misstatement or deviations discovered in a sample to be an anomaly, a hidden bug, the auditor shall obtain a high degree of certainty that such misstatement or deviation is not representative of the entire population, projecting the misstatement. For test of details, the auditor shall project the misstatement of samples in the population. Evaluating the result of sampling is the main area. The auditor shall evaluate the result of sample, whether the use of sampling has provided a reasonable basis for conclusions about the populations that has been tested. So this is our small discussions about sampling. Thank you for watching this video. Have a nice day.